All right, welcome back. Josh Bitar and Alex Goldman here for From the Stands, joined by someone who it has been a little while since we spoke to, September 10th, 2022. So nearly 2 years to the day we last spoke to this man. And he's a friend of ours and he's a friend of yours too. He is the great Jason Anik. Jason, thank you for the time. We appreciate it. It's great to catch up and talk to you, man. Firstly, how are things with you?
Couldn't be better. Honored to be with you guys again. My favorite podcast to go on. This is the one that's the easy yes all day long. But for those of you watching might be a little confused, I know they would get to it. But yeah, John Anik, who might be a familiar face to you, is my identical twin brother. So that's sort of, the beginning of this. But yeah, I mean, I'm trying to make it in the MMA world just like these guys. But love being with you guys. Can't wait to talk.
Appreciate it, man. We had comments on the last time we spoke, and people were commenting saying that's not Jason, that's John, and I had to dispute those comments. But
Yeah.
man, first thing I want to touch on, like we just spoke about off camera, was Belal's title win. Obviously, a close friend of yours. Shout out, remember the show? You guys have a show together and have for some time now. 2020, you guys started, and you guys are friends as well. And to see Belal climb through Andy framed it from Shawshank Redemption. He climbed through the mud. He
Right.
got he got
Right.
through the sewer, and he came out clean the other end. And to the fact that he completely wiped the floor with Leon was one of the most impressive title performances I've ever seen. Considering all the doubt and everything else that he had faced over the years, what was it like for you to see him put that performance out and become the UFC welterweight champion?
Well, the fact that you're referencing the Shawshank Redemption as young as you are, right? One of my favorite movies,
My
definitely
favorite
top
movie
five
too.
of all time. I love it. I love it. So, for me personally, it's interesting, right? And it's like when you talk about Bilal, right? And I think about the 11 fight unbeaten streak, and I'm a broken record, right? And so now there's a lot of respect on my boy Bilal with the 11 fight unbeaten streak with the belt, but not a lot of respect on that 10 fight unbeaten streak. It wasn't as if it was just a few fights. So, but for me personally, for those for your audience who might not be as familiar with North American sports, John and I are from Boston, Massachusetts, and it's all about American football, basketball, baseball, hockey. Growing up in that town, we celebrate championships tremendously and we bask in the glow for several days. I've never felt anything like this with a friend of mine winning a professional sports championship in America, Bilal Muhammad. So for me, right, when we started, I admitted this on the Anik and Florian podcast a few months ago. Bilal didn't like this. I didn't know who he was when we started the show in September of 2020. Now, I've become a MMA fanatic maybe in a way that I wasn't back then. But I didn't know him, and he was unranked. But he was still absolutely a contender, and in his mind, working his way up. And one thing he did admit to us, many months ago, is that he wasn't always sort of envisioning himself being a world champion MMA fighter, but he just kept working at one day at a time, every day. His coach, Mike Valley, always thought he was special, but one day at a time, putting in the work, just putting in the work and blinders on, putting in the work. And, he has made gradual improvements. And a lot of people haven't been paying attention, haven't been watching, just saying that he's boring, saying, remember the decision, but haven't been watching the incremental improvements. And all of a sudden now, yeah, super crispy striker, super dangerous speed, sort of right there with Leon, as Jared Gordon said on our show last night. He's a problem, and his IQ is as higher than anyone's. The things that he can control are better than anyone's. He has the highest IQ in MMA. He has the best cardio in MMA, and all his skills are good enough to cause problems really for everybody in different realms. If it's Shavkat Rakhmonov, it'll be a little tweak. Will it be deep waters again? Probably. But I couldn't be happier. We're basking in the glow. We're celebrating it. I sent him a text today. I try not to text him because I don't want to bug him, right? So sometimes I'll go Instagram. He has to kind of choose to go in there. So usually wakes up at 8 o'clock Central Time. So I texted him 6 minutes before his wake up time. Hey, buddy, just your daily congratulations. Just want to let you know you're the fudging man, because he doesn't like foul language. Just let you know you're the man, and the daily congratulations, and new, and I'll leave you alone.
What's up, guys? It's Josh here From the Stands. And look, I know you're in the middle of a good little interview that we're currently doing, but I want to take a second of your time just to give a quick little shout out to today's sponsor, TrainAid. Obviously, they're big supporters of us, like we are of them. And today they're sponsoring this video. And look, I want to let you guys know about a little product they do. Their premium product, TrainAid Hydration. It's the best hydration formula on the market, guys. I'm not gonna lie to you. And look, if you don't believe me, ask guys like Israel Adesanya. Alexander Volkanovski, Leon Edwards. You ever heard of these guys? I mean, they're the top athletes in the world. And they're all taking Train Night hydration. It really is the #1 formula in the world for hydration. And in the summer months here in Australia, I mean, it's something that I think everyone should be taking. And Train Night have been very nice to give us a discount code, a very healthy discount code as well. I mean, it's a nice little discount code. If you use the code FTS15 at the checkout, they will give you 15% off. We'll leave a link to their website in this description of this video. And yeah, check them out, guys. Please support them because they are supporting us. Cheers.
That's awesome. Well, I wanted to get your opinion on sort of another situation that really came out of that card, which was a really unique one and one we don't see too much, which was Muhammad Mokaev. Obviously a unique situation, undefeated, young fighter, essentially gets cut due to, backstage issues, personality being hard to deal with. And, since then it's, the situation has gotten a little bit worse. PFL has come out, said they're not really too interested. Muhammad came out and said, he's willing to fight again for free if he can get re-signed for one fight. But in your opinion, where do you think Muhammad Mokaev should go from here in order to sort of build his reputation back up in the sport?
Man, don't you think he's asking that same question? I wish I had that answer. It's really interesting about Mokaev because we had him on our show. I like him very much. Super, super talented and a big problem fighter. But the UFC, I'd say community and everybody that works for the UFC, it's a smaller community than you would think. And whether it's the fighters, whether it's coaches, whether it's staff, it's such a good vibe of people and everybody knows each other and everybody treats each other well. And, you have conversations over and over again about fighters and you're like, oh, he's such a good guy. He's such a good guy. It is few and far between that you have a guy that's kind of a problem. And you did hear sort of rumblings, and I heard rumblings before the fight that this was the last one. And, UFC doesn't bullshit, excuse my language. They don't bullshit. And Dana White means business. And frankly, for the big show, they don't need Mokaev. Where he goes, I think he'll land some, if he doesn't land, it's interesting how Dana sort of brought up the PFL. I wonder if the PFL would have taken him if Dana didn't sort of, almost sort of throw him under the bus in that respect. But it's a good question, and I don't have the answer for him. But I do think he'll land somewhere. But it's not like he's going to go bare knuckle and chase any money or anything like that. He wants to compete in mixed martial arts. So, but good lesson for young people and sort of treating people the right way. What was it with Manal Kopp? He posed for a picture and then
I think Eric Nixon.
Right? It's like, I mean, who does that? So I have respect for the UFC, but we're in Manchester, we met some diehard Mokaev fans, people that have been following him forever. So I'd be curious to know how they'd answer that question.
Yeah, absolutely. And just switching gears quickly back to Belal. Jason, he obviously talked about the idea of potentially going to middleweight one day and becoming double champ. It's a very viable path for him. I think he has the skills to do so. In your opinion, as a friend of his and someone who's a fan of the sport as well, what would you like to see him do? Because there's obviously those two avenues where he could stay at 170 for a considerable length amount of time and dominate the division, run through all the contenders, beat the Della Maddalenas, the Shavkats, beat Kobe again if he gets a shot, and really solidify himself as the greatest 170 pounder, or become double champ. There's two different routes sort of thing I feel like he can do, or do both. What would you like to see him do?
So Belal has a little John Anik in him where he likes to just run his mouth a little bit, right? So in terms of middleweight, yeah, he is good. And so, in terms of middleweight, Dricus runs his mouth a little bit. They have a little bit of friction at some point. And so that sort of story took a little bit of a life of itself when Belal was chirping about that on the mic. Belal and Dricus, John says Dricus is like the absolute nicest guy, right? So Belal is a very nice guy too. So they'd probably get along great. But I think that middleweight stuff is noise in the future, perhaps. Belal wants to be a guy that defends, and if he's healthy, defends often. If his nose wasn't busted up, who knows? Maybe he'd be turning around more quickly. But the middleweight stuff, I think, is just a lot of talk. I think he's going to defend at welterweight. And a lot like some of these other champions like Adesanya, who always want to face the best guy, right? I think Belal just wants to face the best guys that are coming up. And, I think he wonders a little bit aloud what Shavkat's actually done to necessarily punch that ticket as the #1 guy, but he doesn't fear anybody. And, My brother John said on his podcast to Belal before the fight, I think Leon Edwards is the toughest matchup for you by far. And Belal was like, I think you're totally wrong. I think it's the easiest matchup for me. And they sort of had that back and forth. However, I do look at all these other contenders and I don't look at them as quite on the level of Leon Edwards. So bring it.
Definitely. So kind of, talking about middleweight, I wanted to get your opinion on, Robert Whittaker recently came out and said that he asked for the Khamzat Chimaev fight, which, I think just shows why, Bobby Knuckles is, nearly everyone's favorite fighter. But, obviously this is a fight they've tried to make in the past, has fallen through. Do you think a win over Khamzat at this point where, Khamzat's had health issues, he's been a little bit inconsistent the last couple of years through no fault of his own necessarily, but do you think a win over Khamzat would be enough to secure Robert Whittaker a title shot, given that Khamzat is relatively unproved against the top of the middleweight division?
Absolutely, more than enough. Khamzat to me is the dude, if he even fights though. But I would ask you, do you think Robert Whittaker has to do anything more to perhaps fight for the belt next at middleweight? Is that a dumb question?
I don't think so. I think you could slot him in. I feel like at the moment.
A lot of guys get title shots, whether it's Steve Erceg, Jamal Hill. Not everybody has to win 10 straight like Belal. But so I guess I answer it in that way. I would allow Whittaker to fight for the belt, right? Who's he lost only Adesanya, whatever. So I'd let him fight for the belt tomorrow. But a win over Khamzat, most certainly. I look at that fight as a title eliminator without question.
And speaking on that middleweight division, Jason, next weekend here in Australia, one of the biggest middleweight title fights in recent memory. Dricus du Plessis defending his middleweight title in a crazy turn of events against the challenger Israel Adesanya, in a fight that has a lot of history and one of those fights that really has more questions than answers, and that's what you look forward to. I feel like in those big time fights where can Israel reclaim the middleweight title, become a 3-time champ? If he doesn't, what does the landscape look like? He's 35. How does this fight play out? It's very, very interesting. And I guess I wanted to get your thoughts on how you see that fight playing out.
Man, I'm as excited for this one as anything. And I will say I'm excited not to have a close friend competing in the main event for a belt and just to sit home and watch. I look forward to that. For me, I don't like to have a rooting interest necessarily, right? And I don't think I've met either guy in person, right? But a lot of times when these fights happen, I sort of know one of the guys, or you know what I mean? And so I sort of have almost like a rooting interest. Like, for example, Renato Moicano lives down here in South Florida. I've gotten to know him a little bit. Undeniably, other than Belal, that might be a guy I root a ton for, right? All these guys that you get to know, you sort of root for guys. For whatever reason, Adesanya, I root excuse me, hard for his greatness. When he beat Pereira, I couldn't have been happier because I root for his greatness. So for me, but du Plessis, I think, is a very interesting problem. I can't wait for the fight. In terms of how it plays out for me, I think we are going to see the absolute best Israel Adesanya, and I do believe that he's on a different level than Dricus du Plessis. However, I think Dricus du Plessis is dangerous, and some of these guys that have power and pop and that no holds barred style, I think can present problems for some guys that may be more technical, but I can't wait for it. I should have looked up the betting line on the fight. Do you guys know the betting line offhand, by the way?
I don't, but I feel like it would be pretty close, I would feel.
I think so too. But I can't wait for it. Popcorn and all night long. I can't wait.
Yeah.
Arman Saryukin the other day, he posted a tweet where about 14 months ago, he essentially called Michael Chandler an idiot for waiting around for the Conor McGregor fight. And obviously now 14 months later from that, still waiting, unconfirmed date, looking like December, maybe lightly. But I guess my question for you is, at this point, Michael Chandler, he has been waiting around for a while for this fight, and makes sense why, huge payday. But this is the back end of his career. This has been a lot of time now off the shelf. And, do you think it's time for Chandler to move on from this fight?
Great question. And I think you could sort of go a couple different ways. I'll start out by saying that I said maybe a month ago that don't worry about Michael Chandler. UFC's taking care of Michael Chandler, right? Now, I don't know that to be true. Then remember, I'm Jason Anik. I'm not John Anik, but I think he's taken care of. And Dustin Poirier said on the Helwani show, I think a couple weeks after, like, I think he was the one who said, oh, he's got the Dana White privilege or whatever Poirier said, right? So I'm from that mindset that even though he may be waiting around for McGregor, Michael Chandler's well taken care of. I'm sure he was well taken care of coming over here. He's had a lot of big fights, and I think he will continue to. I understand missing that sort of stretch of time. But for me, I do think you sort of waited out. You certainly waited out, at least for the balance of this year. But I don't believe, if it never happens, will it be a financial loss? Yes. But do I believe the money he might have lost picking up another fight is not going to be reciprocated in some way? I don't. So I think you wait for it. If I'm Michael Chandler, I wait until further notice. But I bet Michael Chandler knows more than we do in terms of Conor McGregor's health, right? I do think I believe that if Michael Chandler dials Dana White, Dana's picking up the phone and getting honest answer. Dana is an honest guy. He doesn't, he said that Belal was next for the title, and that happened. So, for me, I still am really hoping it happens. I think he should wait, but I also don't think that it's like he's just sitting there, I think getting taken care of.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a quick one, shout out DraftKings. I found the odds. We're at minus 155 for Adesanya, Duplessis 130. So very, very close odds. Jason, I know you said you don't like talking about you, but I want to talk about you for a second because I've been very impressed, man, seeing you be a part of jumping on the commentary in different fights, with shout out Ben the Bane, and see you've been doing some stuff with Ben Davis.
Yep.
Saw Belal in there getting some work on the commentary table. And I guess what's that been like for you to immerse yourself in the world and to be sitting there now, doing what your twin is famous for. Now you're getting the opportunity to sit there and get to follow in his footsteps a little bit. What has that whole process been like for you?
It's been crazy. It's been nuts. I was an actor growing up and in college and moved to LA to try and do that. So, and John and I do have the same DNA, as much as, my wife might not like me saying that over and over again. So some of the sort of natural things we do as humans, are similar for me and John, right? Now, in terms of some of the broadcasting stuff that I've done with Ben the Bane Davis and Belal, Davis has been calling the fights, the play-by-play guy, and Belal and I sort of the analyst, right? I'm not a mixed martial artist. So that was for Anthony Pettis Fighting Championship. So that for me, it's like, I felt like, what am I like what is my role as sort of the third guy, and when I got into the octagon and did some of the post-fight interviews, that felt a little more at home to me, but I'm doing some work for Fight Pass, doing some sort of hosting and watch along and different things like that. And, just trying to get myself out there. But, John has not only done this forever, but it's a very different thing. And for me, it's like the last thing I'm trying to do is take any spots away from anybody else. You can be sure that there are doors that open based on my relationship with John, but I'm sort of trying to do the work. Belal and I have put in 133 episodes. We are not compensated. We put in the work just like he does training. But yeah, it's been fun. It's, some of the twin stuff has been crazy. UFC Fight Pass sent me around at the UFC.
I saw that. Yeah.
Pretending to be John. And so what was nice though, is most of the time everybody thinks I'm John. It's like, I'm sorry. And you wouldn't believe how often that happens.
Yeah.
But to go around and pretend to be him and just to be able to walk and almost try to look at people and get in conversations. It's, we could fool your audience right now. You could cut the program right now and we could come out and we could fool them, and I wouldn't say things as dumb as my brother. I have much more of a filter, I believe.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Well, look, the last one I had for you today is I wanted to, we saw a very unique situation with Tom Aspinall and Curtis Blades. Obviously, Tom Aspinall essentially defending the interim heavyweight belt. And, I guess my question for you is, do you think that Jones should be stripped at this point? Because, I saw someone the other day say that Jones versus Stipe doesn't need a belt on the line for that fight. That's a big enough fight. And I would agree with that sentiment. And obviously the UFC at this point is quite gung-ho on that fight. And, again, I think at that point, Jones been out for a while with various issues. So in your opinion, do you think Jones should be stripped?
I agree with what you said. And for me, right, yes would be the short answer. A year ago in November, I personally had very little appetite for the John Jones-Stipe Miocic fight, even a year ago. And I thought both guys were going to retire after it, right? So it's like, to me, and now we're a year later, so I have even less of an appetite for it. So it's hard to strip the guy that in Dana's mind is the greatest of all time. I think there's a real good chance we're going to see him ready to compete. I hope Aspinall stays ready. I don't know where Stipe's at, but for me, it's, is Aspinall my undisputed heavyweight champion? He is. And I look forward to watching him sort of defend his belt in my mind. I don't think we're going to see a lot more of John Jones if he competes again against Stipe. To your point, if it's more of an exhibition, that's fine, but I don't think it's going to be. I don't think under any circumstance they're stripping John Jones, and it just kind of is what it is. Like the interim belt kind of is what it is, and it means more in certain spots than in other spots. But Aspinall's, I'm not worried about his legend continuing to grow as time goes on.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Jason, thank you very much for joining us today, man. You always come with such a positive energy and just such an upbeat attitude about the sport. It's so refreshing, and it's always an absolute pleasure to have you on here with us. We absolutely congratulate you both for your co-host, winning the belt, and also for your own success in the world of MMA and podcasting, man. We're going to have to talk to you again in future.
Anytime, boys. Always a pleasure to be with you. Good luck. Enjoy 305.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Thanks, man.
Thank you.